Do you think it's just that not enough Israelis have gone over into Palestine and seen the occupation, and which is, on one hand, I could say, well, not very many have seen it, but practically every Israeli serves in the IDF, right? So they would have to have seen it, I would think, at some point and have participated in it. But at the same time, it's also very dangerous for Israelis to go over into these Palestinian cities. There's big, when you're over there, the big red signs that say, warning, do not go here. This is territory that belongs to the Palestinians. And if you cross in here, your life is in danger. I mean, they have these giant signs telling people to do this. And from my experience when I was there, Palestinians told me that there is some truth to that there is so much hostility between the two groups that it would be dangerous for an Israeli to find themselves wandering accidentally even into a Palestinian zone. One of my Palestinian guides mentioned how he had actually rescued an Israeli he clearly could see that he had gone off the wrong path and was lost and didn't know where he was. And he flagged him down and said, you need to get out of here. Like, this is not good for you to be here. And obviously there's that same in the reverse, that Palestinians that find themselves wandering maybe in the wrong spot. It's a very hostile, dangerous situation. So I would imagine it's difficult for Israelis to even go over and witness the occupation from the viewpoint, the vantage point of a Palestinian and what they have to go through every day. Do you think, how can that bridge be? Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, I have to disagree with you, Kim. There is no danger for Israelis to go into any Palestinian city. I go into Palestinian cities with an Israeli license plate, and nobody knows who the hell I am. And I've never once encountered, and I've gotten lost, and I've asked for directions, and they can see I'm an Israeli. I mean, there's no way that I'm not an Israeli, even though I speak Arabic. I'm an Israeli, and it is so untrue. Now, it has happened that soldiers have entered. Right. I don't believe for one second that they wandered in, innocently and made a mistake, because like you said, there are all these big signs. You cannot enter a Palestinian city by mistake. It doesn't happen. It's impossible. The signs are there. The roads are different. A couple of miles before you're there that you're on your way to a Palestinian area, whether it's Nazareth, whether it's in the south, in the Nakab, the Bedouin Palestinians, whether it's in Lid. I mean, it's completely not true that Israelis can somehow wander and get lost. And I've gotten lost, and I've driven with friends, and I've gotten lost, and people were nothing but kind and generous. Now, if a soldier goes in, then he's not lost. That's different. I'm not talking about somebody walking in uniform. I'm talking about somebody who goes in. It's not the same for Palestinians. Palestinians walking around Tel Aviv are suspects, and they have to worry for their lives, because if they take a wrong turn, if they speed a little bit, if they go in the wrong direction, if they look at somebody funny, they will find themselves dead. So there's no symmetry here at all. Mm-hmm. Although this is kind of the prevailing narrative, it's really not. It doesn't stand the test of truth and the test of reality. But Israelis don't want to know. That's the problem. Israelis don't want to know. Israelis are happy living in their bubble in this apartheid state. And if we take a look now, all these months where Israelis have been protesting in the streets. Now, granted, these are the kind of the privileged parts of the Israeli society that are protesting. Pilots, officers who are like the cream of the crop, people who are wealthy, people who are the upper echelons of Israeli society. And they've never been out in the streets. They could be out in the streets demanding ending the siege on Gaza, which is a cruel, brutal, unnecessary siege where 2 million people are kept in an open-air prison without access to clean water, without access to medical care, without access to proper food, and are being bombed regularly by Israel. You never see hundreds of thousands of Israelis. You never see the Israeli pilots refusing, saying, we will not do this. We will not bomb. We will not drop tons of bombs on civilian population in Gaza. You never see that. They could be in the streets, hundreds of thousands of them, as they are now, demanding justice, demanding the Palestinians get water. Palestinians do not have access to water. Where are these Israelis who are supposedly, liberal or even progressive? They don't protest for this. What they're calling for is they're concerned that their own democracy, their own life, their own privilege within the small frame of the apartheid state is being endangered. And it is, and fair enough. I'm not saying It's not. But that's all they're worried about. So Israelis don't care They've completely separated themselves from the reality of the people that they control and brutalize.
Yeah. Yeah, I when I was over there, it was shocking. Yeah, when I have a lot of Jewish friends, and they go to Israel, they love Israel, they're Zionists in a way, and they would say to me, "Well, you're not getting the other side of the story. You know, you only went to the West Bank, you only got the Palestinian side. You're not seeing our side or hearing our side." And no one told me any stories. I wasn't on a guided tour of storytelling. It was they just showed me places. They just took me around, and I followed Palestinians around and went through checkpoints and went to their cities and ate in their restaurants. And there was beautiful. It went to the Dead Sea, floated in the Dead Sea. Things just went and experienced it. And when you're there experiencing it with Palestinians, and you have to go through what they have to go through each day, and the guns in the faces and checking the bags, and I mean, it's traumatizing. It's totally and completely traumatizing. Seeing that the water's only available a few days a week, and they're filling up these big tanks filled with water. It is totally traumatizing. Then you go over to Israel, and they've got lush green lawns because they're watering them all the time, and it's beautiful and wonderful, and it's just like a European area. And then you go over to the West Bank, and it's a completely different world, and they're just right next door to each other. It was completely traumatizing. So I want to get into the two-state solution and the one-state solution issue here, because the argument is, and from what I saw, I did witness a lot of hostility between both groups. I mean, I went to Hebron. I mean, and you see these like real ultra settler, right? Ultra crazy Zionist settlers who were like yelling at me because they could tell that I was with Palestinian groups to show
Right.
what was really going on. And they were angry that I was there to see that. And then I
Right.
also did see some hostile Palestinians that I felt, I felt fear several times while over there from all sides, because it's an extreme mentalities that we don't experience here in the United States in our bubble of we think we have extremes here, right? We think that we have this like far right extreme and far left extreme in America. We don't know extreme until we go over there, and then you see extreme mentalities that you only have read in history books in America about how the founding of this country happened.
Yeah.
But how do you reconcile that? How would you make a one-state solution when you do have a demographics issue? So when you're an Israeli and you're sitting there and you're thinking about this logically, there's more of them, especially if you let the right of return, all the refugees come back. Now you've got a demographic issue. And do you think, in all honesty, that if it was a one-state democratic situation, that the Palestinians would, if there's more of them and they're voting, do you think that, what's the first thing they would do? In my mind, the first thing they would do is change the name to Palestine. They'd be like, well, Israel's over. This is now Palestine. There's more of us than you. And so that's what we're doing. First things first.
Okay. All right. So what? Anybody doesn't
Okay.
want to live, any Jewish person that doesn't want to live in Palestine can take their bags and go somewhere else. They are in
So
Palestine. The fact that they changed the name in 1948 didn't make it stop being Palestine. It still is Palestine. It was
right.
Palestine going back for thousands of years. And so if anybody is uncomfortable living with an Arab majority, what the hell are they doing in coming to colonize an Arab country?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
But
I mean, that's just the way it is. They don't like it. They can go somewhere else. The reality is, this, Kim, look, there's no choice. The choice is not one state, two state, because there is no scenario on earth that the state of Israel, this Zionist entity, which is founded on a racist, supremacist ideology, which is Zionism, which has been an apartheid state from day one. It was designed as an apartheid state, and the Amnesty International report from last year demonstrates with data very clearly. Of course, I knew it. Many of us knew it, a long time ago. But, very clearly that it was an apartheid state from the get-go. There is no scenario that state is going to allow a Palestinian entity full independence anywhere. Number one. Number two, what they have done throughout Palestine cannot be undone. There is no place where there are only Jews and only Arabs and you can somehow splice the country. Number two, and number three, You talked about the West Bank and visiting them with the West Bank. If you go to Lid, where the Tel Aviv airport sits,
Yeah.
Tel Aviv airport sits on the occupied city of Lid. You know, there are entire neighborhoods with tens of thousands of people who have no access to water, no access to education, no access to roads, no access to anything, cannot buy a new apartment because they're Arabs. And this is right smack in the heart, and they're Israeli citizens. And this has
Yeah.
happened in the Negev, in the south, in the Galilee, and everywhere else. So there is nothing special about the West Bank in terms of the oppression, in terms of what Palestinians are going through. It's just that it's a slightly different bureaucracy. It's a slightly different system that's doing it. So number one, it's an impossibility. Number two, even if you did, there is no place in the country where you could splice and cut. And number three, why in the world should the Zionists get 80% of the country that they stole? And the Palestinians, why should they agree to accept 20%? It is Palestine. And for 4,000 years, until May 15, 1948, that country was known and referred to as Palestine. Look at any map going back and you're going to see it referred to as Palestine. Suddenly the Zionists came, stole a country that was thriving, and by the way, and in full bloom. They stole produce from the field. They stole entire cities that are already established. They stole money from people, people's money from the banks. They stole a country that was in full bloom, and then they lied about it and said, oh no, we made the desert bloom. Really? So where did the Jaffa oranges come from? And how is it that Palestinians were exporting cotton and oil and all these different things to Europe, all these hundreds and hundreds of years going back? You see, so why should Palestinians accept anything but an absolute free and democratic Palestine and the absolute right of the refugees to return? If Israelis don't want to live in a Palestinian state, if they don't want to live in a state, in a state where Palestinians are a majority, they need to get the displaced out because Palestinians are already a majority. They need to get the hell out. The only reason they're staying is because there's an apartheid regime where they feel comfortable as, as privileged people.
But they do have very different lifestyles now. I mean, many of the Christian Palestinians who are many, if not most of the Palestinians in America, I think are Christian Palestinians that have been driven out. And they're more liberal. They share a lot of the same, they would probably vote similarly when it comes to lifestyle as the Israelis. But a lot of the Palestinians that are there now are very conservative, very conservative Muslim. And they would want a different lifestyle with different laws. So you would then create a situation. Well, I mean, you shrug your shoulders, but that's a serious. But that's a serious shift. Well, you've got all these people living in Tel Aviv. You've got all these people that are living in Israel, and I sympathize with that. They can't help that they were born there. I mean, look, like I'm an American born in America, but America was once, same thing. I mean, the same. What I saw in the West Bank was very clear what America did to the natives, right? It was obvious what was happening there was really, like you said, there's no desire for a two-state solution or any solution. The real goal is to take over all of it. Maybe some Palestinians will live in little Palestinian reservations. That's what it kind of looks like is happening. And it's like, okay, we'll give you this little reservation, but ultimately you're living in the United States of America, and you've got like some native land, kind of whatever. That's clearly what it looks like they're actually attempting to do. And they're making their lives so miserable. They want the Palestinians to just go. Like, look, why stay here? You don't get running water and you only get it 3 days a week. Why don't you just go live in Jordan? Or why don't you just go immigrate to America or immigrate somewhere? Just get out of here so that we can have this land, right? That's like pretty clear what's happening. But it's already been done in a bunch of the country. And it's like, we can't return America back to the natives and say, well, if we don't want to live here, then just pack our bags and get out.
But that's not a fair comparison either. And I'll tell you why. Even South Africa is not a fair comparison, even though it's the closest in many ways. So what do we have when we look at Palestine? The entire country, from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean, from the northern border with Syria and Lebanon to the Gulf of Aqaba. There are about 12 million people living there. There are about 7 million Palestinians, about 6 million Israelis. Now, Israelis can live anywhere they want, and they live, kind of a full democracy. They have all the rights, they have protection under the law. Palestinians have no protection under the law, and they live in 3 or 4 different realities, different legal bureaucracies.
Right.
So you've got the citizens of Israel, about 2 million of them. Some of them who live in the Negev live under a bureaucracy, their own bureaucracy with their own law enforcement, which is designed to kick out the Palestinian Bedouin and deprive them of water and so forth, and live in terrible conditions. Then you've got the Palestinians in Jerusalem who
Right.
don't really have rights. I have friends whose families have been in Jerusalem for over 800 years, documented 800 years in Jerusalem. And if they leave, they
Yeah.
lose their land, they lose their right. My grandparents immigrated. I've been gone for all these years. I can go back tomorrow and live there. So and then you've got the West Bank, and then you've got Gaza, and within the West Bank you've got Area A, B, and C. This really complicated, reality that in which Palestinians live. But at the same time, you have two people, Israelis and Palestinians, who are highly educated and have traditions of democracy and can get to work tomorrow morning. If apartheid fell tomorrow morning, if an Israeli prime minister, just like de Klerk did in South Africa, Israeli prime minister stood up and said, "We are unbanning all the political parties, so anybody can run. We're releasing the thousands of political prisoners, and they can be free to run for office, do what they want, and we're calling for a one-person, one-vote election in 6 months." That would basically mean the fall of Zionism, the end of
Israel.
apartheid.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah. But the end of
next day-
Israel,
so-
like we have to be realistic about that. That would be the end of
Of
Israel.
course it would. Of
Yeah,
course,
that would
Israel
be.
is
Okay.
Israel is a synonymous to apartheid. The fact that they gave it a pretty name doesn't make it legitimate. I refuse to
Sure.
call the country by the name Israel. I think it legitimizes a terrible crime. When people ask me where I'm from, even though I'm an Israeli, obviously I say Palestine. Now, if you had these elections, let me kind of finish that thought. If you had these elections in 6 months, you'd have to divide the country into voting districts, because right now there are no voting districts, so it's not really a representative democracy. Israel is all one voting district for many reasons. I won't get into that. And a district would have to be mixed Israelis and Palestinians, because the population live, even though they live in such different realities, like you said, they basically geographically live very close together. So let's say I'm a Palestinian and I have a neighbor who's an Israeli, and we have to go vote. Are we going to vote for someone who's offering us good roads, good schools, good hospitals, low taxes? Or are we going to vote purely on nationalistic lines? Some people will. Some people will pick the latter. But I bet you the majority of the people will choose the former, because people want to live. They want good schools, good roads, low taxes. They want the lights to go on, the water to go on, the faucets, and that's it. So
Right.
that's how you create a democracy. That's how you take two sides that have been at odds for all these years, and you demonstrate their common interest. You demonstrate the commonality. More than half Israelis have Arab backgrounds. They speak Arabic at home. They listen to Arabic music, and they eat Iraqi food or Moroccan food or Syrian food and so on. You know what I mean? Like I said, more than half Israelis are actually Arabs. So the thing is, do you maintain the apartheid and make sure that one side is privileged while the other side is down as low as could possibly be? And right now, what we're seeing, the finance minister froze hundreds of millions of dollars of budgets that are supposed to go to Palestinian municipalities within Israel, within 1948, where Palestinian citizens of Israel live. Hundreds of millions that were supposed to go to, that were promised these municipalities. And he allocated hundreds of millions more to developing the settlements in the West Bank that already exist, adding infrastructure and road and so on and so forth. This is happening just now. As Hakeem Jeffries or everybody from Hakeem Jeffries to Ron DeSantis to RFK Jr. are all hailing this Jewish democracy. They passed a law that says that if I rape a Jewish woman, I get a lesser sentence than an Arab, a Palestinian who rapes a Jewish woman. As these laws are being passed, as these budgets are being passed, as thousands of Palestinians are being imprisoned as political prisoners, as millions of Palestinians are denied rights, denied water, their children are being killed on a regular basis, on a daily basis. These people, again, from RFK Jr. all the way to DeSantis and Trump, are hailing this democracy.
Yeah.
It's absurd. It has never been a democracy, and it's time to stop talking about this nonsense and stop sending billions of dollars to this racist apartheid state, which, by the way, like I said, has never been a democracy.